All right, welcome everyone. This is your girl. This is we are here. We are Many Hands, Many Head Podcast, Many Hands Crew, and we are back discussing more content, more of who we are, business and social consciousness. We like to reach out to you guys. Please hit us up, Many Hand Podcast on Instagram, Many Hands Podcast on Facebook. Please hit us up. Let us know what you want to hear, all sorts of things. And we are all business-oriented people, and we're also very intertwined with our community and creating change and breathing life into everybody else as brothers and sisters. So that's who we are. We want to continue to hear from us. So welcome to the Many Hands Podcast. We're here for another recording. I am your girl, O. You can find me at orielross.com, ORIELROSS.com. I'm a business strategist out of Orlando, Florida, and excited to be here. I'm here with my crew. Who's next up?
You have Rio Winfrey here, model, actor, fitness expert, teaching people to work themselves out mentally, spiritually, and physically. You can find me at riowinfrey.com. That's RIOWINFREY.com.
Hello, everybody. This is Antron Watts. I am the co-founder and partner in Personal Injury Professionals. We assist victims involved in auto accidents, slip and falls, workers' comp. Any way we can assist you, get you back to health. And also, if you need legal assistance, get you connected. You can find us at www.pipinjury.com. And thank you. Glad to be here with my thought partner.
Hey, here it is. B. McKinney, Brian McKinney with McKinney Brands. Business consultant, realtor, travel broker, all things happening. Give me a shout. You can find me at Brian at McKinneyBrands.com. Brian at McKinneyBrands.com. Look forward to talking with you.
Boom. Next time, make sure you unmute. How about that? So we're always experimenting with our technical savvy here. But as always, we come together with what's pressing right now. What's pressing right now that we want to talk about is the Exonerated Five, the Central Park jogger case, the documentary that was done by Miss Ava Duvernay, and brilliantly done, I must say, and it's really sparked a lot of conversation in the community and outside the community. I mean, people who were familiar with the case, I grew up in New York City, so I clearly remember this happening. I remember there were some other young boys who were arrested in my church, and I'm not sure timeline-wise if it was before or after the conviction, the wrongful conviction of the people in the Central Park case, but I do remember the pastor of my church going to bat and working with those parents and making sure to, as much as we could, protect those young boys who were just going to the movies. So I do remember that, and I remember it affecting my community very, very well. So it's interesting to live history. I think you guys, I don't know, do you feel that? Like, we're living history, and I think that that's important.
Absolutely. It's crazy that this happened 30 years ago, but we're still sort of dealing with all of the same sort of effects and actions and behaviors are still happening today. So we're living history, and hopefully this gives us a peek into our past so that we know how to better be prepared to go forward for the future.
Absolutely. It's definitely great to relive history, as painful as it can be. I mean, just watching this special, like Oriel said, brilliantly done by Ava. It was very emotional. I mean, I experienced a lot of different emotions. I was angry. I mean, I was sad. I mean, I was happy, with the ending of how it ended. But it's important to put it out there. I think a lot of things are coming out that need to be seen that probably should have been put in a larger scope and larger view previously, but it's better late than never. But I think this is all great things overall, just shining more light on the injustice that continues to go on to this day.
Yeah.
And it just shows you that it took something like Ava Duvernay's project, when they see us, to really shine a spotlight. They have been talking about this for quite a while, off and on, and it shined a spotlight on the injustices of it. Rio, you're correct. As you watched it, you got further and further into the show, into the episodes, it became more difficult to watch, especially the last episode. That was definitely the toughest. But, you know, I'm glad to see that some of these guys really took their pain and they use it for a more positive outlet. But it's no excuse for what happened and how long it went on.
Yeah. I feel like the first episode was hard, and I don't know, just coming from a maternal perspective, the first episode was hard, and it was, I paused before I went into episodes 2 and 3. So if you're a Netflix person, you're about binge watching, and I couldn't do it. So Brian went and he was like, well, I'm going for it. And he went, and by the time I was ready, he goes, I'll watch it again with you. But I found it was painful, but necessary. It's the least that we can do is to hear their story. They actually lived it. So the least we can do is learn about it. But I found it incredibly hard to watch from the onset. And it never got any easier. So it was more difficult as time went on, and my stomach still turns. And I'm fascinated. Like every interview I come across, I want to listen to it. I want to, where are they now? I have so many questions for the guys that I hope come up in interviews that they do. What was the most powerful part of the series for you guys?
For me, like Antwan said, it was that part 4 where we saw Korey going through the whole prison system and spending all of his time behind bars and what he went through and had to endure in there. And that, those guys went in with a lot of strikes against them. Number one, their age. They were young kids when they went in, especially Korey. He was 16. He'd go into Rikers with adults. And then also their experience, their case, their trial, everything was on TV. So their names, they went in, they were marked men, marked boys already. And so to see him go through and endure all of that, it was tough, man. And the actor who played Korey, Jarrell Jerome, did a absolutely phenomenal job. And he had the young Korey and old Korey. And the way he did it, it was hard. Like Twan said, that 4th part for me was hard to see, hard to watch, but it just shows his strength.
But directly, it's you saw the impact of the rape that happened, and we can only infer that they all were sexually abused in jail just because of the hierarchy of the prison system and their particular meritocracy and injustice internally. You can't feel good about that.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, those guys, those boys, they went in there, and you're one step above a child molester in prison as a rapist, and those guys, they were boys, man. And so it just, they had to, we saw it with Korey, but I'm sure those other guys, as they went and transitioned from juvie into the prison system, I think they all did probably 2 years or so. That they probably had, there's more to the story that we're not seeing. Ava did a fantastic job telling their story from their point of view. I know Ken Burns did a Central Park 5 documentary a few years ago. But this is the first time I think that they really painted the picture from their story.
I agree with all that's been said. At the end of the day, I feel like they sent those boys, as you gracefully stated, they sent them in there to die, in my opinion. The most powerful moment would be episode 4 for me as well, or part 4, I should say. I just felt like I was in there with him. I mean, you can kind of feel, which gives credit also to the actor Terrell Jerome who played Korey Wise. You can kind of just feel the pain and everything he went through, and that's when I was the most emotional throughout the whole series there. So at the end, you do feel that happiness when he gets that call. And the sad thing is, he went in there, it's like, what now? And they're telling him like, hey, the guy has come forward who really did it. And he was, before that, he was just like, assuming, the words that I go back to my cell and so forth. That was a very touching moment and the most powerful for me. So he did the most time, but they all just endured a lot of hell. And I think was sent there to die initially.
And his brother passed, was murdered while he was in.
Right.
And his brother was, next to his mom, I guess, was the one who looked out for him the most. And to have to get that information and get that pain while you're back there, and you could see he was like, nobody gives an F about me. And the fact that man is still here right now is just, I'm at a loss for words, man.
Yeah, and I want to say, oh, sorry. Oh, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, even when O talked about episode 1, just as soon as you press play and it started, you could feel, obviously the story, but you could feel it coming. And I'm going to tell you, besides part 4, when they went into Korey Wise being in solitary confinement, when they went into that part of it, obviously that was painful to watch, and he did a fantastic job bringing that experience like through the screen to you so you could feel it. But part 1, when Antron McCray, when his father was convincing him to confess, I felt horrible for his father in the sense in that moment, because they used his own criminal background against him to say, oh, well, if you don't do this, does your job know you're a criminal?
Yeah, but that's part of manhood too, right?
Oh,
so the fact that
absolutely.
I struggle with that Antron hasn't forgiven him to present day, and he's already passed away. So it's like you just have to move on. I don't think he has. In the interview, he seemed very, very much so broken. But he decided to leverage his son for his gain, and that I could see why he hasn't been forgiven. Antron's going to have to for his own mental health,
his own sanity. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because he doesn't seem to be. Him and Korey seem to probably have suffered the most physically and emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
They don't seem ready for the world right now.
No, I agree 100%. It seems as those two have dealt with it and are still, I think, to this day, probably dealing with it. Antron even said that, he recognized the fact that he needs to talk to somebody, needs some help and some therapy, but he's not really ready to commit to it. But I would love to see that man, probably all of them, really go in and seek some counseling. But I think Korey and Antron the most.
Yeah, we were talking about Yusef, because he seems he's done the most educationally and visibly. Well, Raymond Santana as well. But his sense of responsibility that he feels to look out for Korey, that must be tough. It's like whether Korey forgives him or not, you have to just continue to be there. Whether Korey treats him as a doormat, whether Korey treats him as, hey, my brother, whether you know what I mean. You have to take it, because Korey shouldn't have been there. He just went down to support his friend and was railroaded into the charges.
No, for sure. Well, so real quick, I just want to go back to the father just for a second. The reason I said that part is just because, yes, I could not imagine, I don't have children, but my nephews and nieces, I couldn't imagine trying to convince them and coerce them into saying something that they standing strong saying, I did not do this. I didn't do it. I couldn't imagine trying to convince them to admit something that's going to change their lives forever.
Yeah, you also have never been in jail, right? So who knows? But I don't even know what the father went to jail for. I don't know what his experience was like. I don't know how much time he served. There are a lot of unknowns in that.
A lot of unknowns in that. And I just want to, just taking it away from him and just other men in that position. I don't know too many men that would do that.
Mm-hmm. It's very
that would
cowardly.
just throw their sons, basically hang them out to dry. I don't know many men that would do that, but I wanted to know. I was fascinated by that part, like what was going on in his mind, what was his story that drove him to that. Like there's something there,
Yeah,
and I was really.
Ava still depicted him as a loving father, which was brilliant, right?
Yeah.
So he still loved his son, but he made a horrible decision.
And I think you could see that played in what happened, that played out in the future for him as well, where I think the pressure got to be too much, probably the guilt got to be too much for him, where he didn't come to the trial until the end, and then he tries to kind of maybe save him a little bit, which also kind of puts the final nail in the coffin for him, and seals his fate. And then he leaves his mom while he's in, you know what I mean? So you could see that it took a toll on him. I tried to put myself in his shoes, as a father of a young black boy, and I've never, to O's point, I've never been to prison, but I'm with you, Twan. I could never, I could never do that, because that's, at that age, that's his innocence, that's his future. Like whatever I did in the past, he shouldn't have to pay with his future because of my past.
And his father knew what it was like. That's what O was saying earlier. Like his father knew the experience of prison. Yeah. And now, again, he didn't know, again, son, they say you can go home after this. Just say it. Just admit to it. But he had to know better in that sense that his son wasn't going home.
It just boggles my mind. I mean, we talk about this within every facet of life, but common sense, right? So it's like, well, they said I can go home if I admit it. And, you don't have to understand legalese to know that makes no sense. But that disparity in, wanting to think that the justice system will serve you justice. And I think now as a people, we know that that's not the case. At that point, we said, you can sue for your rights, you can get restitution, you can be exonerated in court. And I think now people know that you can go through this, even in this day and age, and serve time for a crime that you didn't do and have no recourse. I mean, that to me is very sad.
That's what I wanted to touch on as well. It's just saying it's, it's painful as it was to watch. It was very educational, but it's ultimately, I guess, a good teaching point too, that especially nowadays, like, it's sad to say, but we need to be educating, like in your case, B, and you have a young black son, and educating them on legal systems when the time is right and so forth. Those boys didn't know any better. They were just, you're a kid, you're young, you're like tired. They've been in there for hours. They're like, hey, here's soda. They're just keeping them up, so they're going to say anything, thinking they can go home. But it's the education piece that's going to be very key and important. Going forward.
They would not have questioned young boys who are not of color. They would not have done that. And that to me is key. That, like, again, I may have mentioned this before, but I have a friend, and that person's daughter ended up in some kind of drug issue. And the cops called the parents. Never pressed charges, never wrote anything up, just like, oh, you can tell that she's from a good home. How can you tell? She's passed out and trespassing on somebody else's property and creating a ruckus. I don't know what she was on, probably something synthetic, goes right to your brain. But what would make you think, besides her white skin, that she's from a good home versus these young boys that they're not from a good home? And those kind of inequities are what breaks you. Because like right now, our son is at this age of innocence, he'll tell you something is not fair. And you just want to say, pause, homie. The ice cream that your sister had is the least of your problems, and what's not going to be fair. It's hurtful, but we have to start the conversations early.
We talk about this all the time. I talk with friends, and I tell them about the conversations that my parents had with me when I was a child, when I was 6, 7, 8 years old.
Tell us about that. Tell us about those conversations.
Yeah, so my mom and dad used to talk to me all the time. If you get pulled over, if you get stopped by a police officer for any reason, we lived in a neighborhood where I could walk to a store. Hey, if something's going on at the store and you get wrangled into that, hey, yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. If there's any problems, you don't say anything, you get on the phone and you get to us, period. Like, these are conversations as a child when you don't understand why you're really having those conversations, but all your friends' parents are having those conversations with them too. So you just think it's, hey, this is the way it is. And when I would talk as I got older and I would tell people that come from different cultures, they, wait, your parents did what? Why did they talk to you about the police? I'm like, why didn't your parents talk to you about the police? Oh, you just didn't have to worry about it. It wasn't something that in your communities, it was something you had to worry about. And this is the thing that I tell people all the time, you know, again, being, oh, y'all have a young son, and I'm sure Ross, he's 5 now. I'm sure y'all have conversations with him, you know, as he gets to those ages that will mimic what those conversations were had with us.
Yeah. Ross is also, he's a little off center, right? So he likes to watch the news. His entertainment is Jeopardy.
That's my man.
So he's a little different, right? And, you know, he comes around, he's like, you know, something happened, he goes, well, did the police shoot him? Are the police bad? Like, and I would never have that conversation with him now. You know, I tell him, like, law enforcement's here to help and all those, you know what I mean? At that age, you should want to be a policeman. You should want to be a fireman, you know? And I try to instill that in him, but he's hearing, like, he transmits a lot of the signals that are going on around him. He's born into this era of distrust when it comes to legal authority.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to, it's tough to hear that because he's 5 years old. And this is, again, and I always tell him, like, be 5. Like, this is a time to be 5 and be, not have a care in the world, have fun, stop, don't be so stressed out. Let mommy and daddy stress out. But yeah, I mean, like I said, he asks these questions and sometimes I'm kind of caught, like, do I give him the real truth or do I get, sugarcoat a little bit right now? And then when he's maybe in 2 years or so, when he's a little bit more mature, do I give it to him then when he's 7? Because the last thing you want to do is put a dark cloud on a kid's innocence.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So let me bring up something. We touched on it a little bit. We touched on Marcy, who was Korey's transgender brother. And so it says that she was murdered, but it doesn't say how. And we don't talk about sexuality in the Black community, when it comes to our LGBTQ brothers and sisters. We don't really talk about it too much. But I wonder why she was murdered. Because, so statistically, they have a harder time getting employment. So there's a lot of, sex trade that comes in that environment just because of necessity, survival, and they have to live. And then that comes with a certain amount of violence. Did that strike you as wanting to know more about her persona?
Yes, absolutely. Because I felt like she was an important character, because she was important in his life, obviously, but we didn't really see enough. It's kind of like a teaser, for lack of better terms. Kind of like, here she is. This person's very important to her. We didn't get a lot of her story either, at all. If anything, she was transgender. So.
Yeah, and I feel like Korey was misunderstood. I mean, he's has a learning disability. He has a hearing issue, and a lot of times your sibling is the only person that understands you, the only person that knows what you go through. And so the way that was taken from him without, further knowledge to the audience, it kind of, just makes me wonder if, how much more that added to his pain.
When I saw that, right after I watched that episode, I started looking it up and trying to find out what happened. But there's not really a lot of information on that murder either. So I don't know if Ava, in telling that part of the story, if she didn't want to take away, wanted to give it some context to Korey and what he went through, or if it just, because of the lack of information and maybe, again, we don't know how much Korey knows about that.
Yeah, I did read I did read that because she may have gone by 2 or 3 different names, some of the information was hard to trace historically. You know, we're not in the day of social media and things like that where, you know, you have, it gives you the freedom to document your own history, you know. If anybody looks at your public online footprint, they can figure out who you are. And so that's a little bit of a deficit in her story.
And
that's a great point.
And I think Ava did a fantastic job in telling the story, keeping it focused on that, but also while being extremely respectful of sensitive areas of, like we talked about earlier, their time in prison. They didn't go. I mean, they inferred it a little bit, maybe implied a little bit, like, and obviously we all know, like we talked about earlier, those guys, you know, being labeled rapists, they were one step above child molesters, like you said, B. And so we know what goes on in those environments, but just obviously that was painful for them. They didn't really go too far into that. I think that part with the sister was a very touchy, very sensitive topic as well. I don't think that they want to go too far into that. I did the same thing. I tried to research a little bit more about that part of the story because I thought them including that obviously was an important character in his life, but them including that also showed it gave light to the story of the mother's growth.
Mm.
You know, her going from being who she was and being a, you know, drug addict, you know, having drinking issues, and then finding her spirituality and her Christianity, and, you know, now, you know, showing that love for a transgender child that she did not have previously.
Yeah, for I believe it's Antron, he's lost his mom recently.
Yeah.
And the mothers, they held these boys down. And when nobody believed in them, when people separated from them and their children, they were there. So to lose the one person that's always been there for you, you know, it's kind of, how do you come back? How do you come
Yeah.
back? We did a psychologist on panel because I'm out of answers.
That's true. Another thing I want to touch on also, I mean, just with anything nowadays in justice, obviously, we talk about race and then how that's involved and plays a role. But let's also not forget, initially when these charges were brought forth, different communities, including the Black community also, and we kind of assumed the worst without getting all the facts. And then that's kind of when we turned and said, hold up. So we went from not all of us, and saying there were some that were believing this was true. And then at the end of the day, the story kept coming about. Like, hold on, then we kind of, you know, switch sides. So I just think it's also a lesson there is to always seek truth before kind of jumping on the ship, you know, for lack of a better term.
But what do you think about, so I'm going to throw it back to Rio. So today, April Ryan, during a press conference, gave President Trump the opportunity to apologize since he took out the ad and called for the death penalty of these young boys. He's made no apology or even statement. It doesn't have to be a full-on apology. Let's just say he believed the DA and he believed, let's just give him the benefit of the doubt. But since they've been exonerated by DNA evidence, by timeline, by proof that their these recorded confessions were edited, you know, technology-wise, and, you know, so the jury did not get an accurate picture. And he refused. He was like, "Oh, they admitted it." And he refused to say anything. And this is today. This is just hot off the press. Today is what? June 19th. So he was asked this question today. And he refused to go forward. What are your thoughts on that?
I guess my thoughts are pretty simple. And I am not surprised by his response. I mean, did we expect anything more? I mean, can we say we really expected the so-called president to say an apology or have a difference of opinion? I'm not surprised by his response. He's somebody, even if he is wrong, he's that person that would never admit that. He's that person we can never expect an apology from. Whatever he says,
Exactly.
So in his mind, they are guilty. You know, it didn't make any sense. What did he say? They've already said there. How did he say it? I don't want to misquote what he said, but he said something about they've admitted their guilt or something like that.
Yep, pretty much. If that's not his exact quote, it's a pretty accurate paraphrase. They admitted it.
Right. So
we're good.
Yeah, I mean, like you just stated, you had the the guy that's responsible for it admitted to doing it. The DNA evidence was there. I mean, even the
And
victim.
he has a
Yeah.
son in that age range. So, there's absolutely no part of him with any compassion for anything. Like if you have a son in that age, would he trust his son to talk to the police without an attorney?
Oh, absolutely not.
No, but he didn't even make that correlation. So it's kind of like, if he's not everybody's president.
Right.
Well, he doesn't trust his son now in adulthood to talk to somebody without an attorney. So
Also
how about
true.
that? I was thinking about the youngest.
yeah, yeah.
But
You
absolutely.
don't trust anybody.
Well, I'm gonna take it to the older ones. All right? 'Cause
Yes,
we don't trust them. All right, but that's the thing that like Rio said, nothing surprises me anymore. It's a shame because it ended up basically I was just like, I was like, okay, I mean, I expected that, and that's sad. That really is sad, but that's the state of our White House at this moment.
Yeah, I want, our kids, like, if there's another 4 more years of this, Ross will definitely be in a different level of consciousness, and so he doesn't have vast political knowledge, obviously, but he'll say things like, he's not kind. He doesn't say nice things to people, and that's not good. And I'm like, I haven't told him that. He's not around during the recording or anything. So, kids are very intuitive. Our next generation, generations should get smarter as they go along. Like I expect them to be bigger and greater than I am. So it blows my mind every time he sees through, what we try to mask. So let me ask you guys a question. Let's say that the exonerated five were with us today. Who would you have a question for, and what question would that be? Who do you want to get to know a little better?
Ooh, that's a great question. I mean, I want to get to know every single one of them. I would have to go with Korey, and kind of going back to the special. I mean, at one point his dream was to get like a chia pet, but I want to know ultimately what got him through his, as we talked about, he probably could use therapy now, but what actually got him through everything? Because you've seen stories going forward to Khalif Browder, that definitely affected him, his whole ordeal, and ultimately just he wasn't right, and sadly, he took his own life. So what kept him strong enough to where now he's able to talk about it, telling his story? You see him out taking pictures with fans and so forth. It actually did not break him completely. He's bent a little bit, but he wasn't completely broken. So what kept him going at the end of the day?
That's a great question. For me, I want to know about Raymond's stepmother. Like, right? I want to know if she's still in the picture. She's still married to his dad. Did she ever apologize for calling him rapist in his home? Did she ever apologize for edging him out of the relationship, trying to edge him out of a relationship with his dad? What about the relationship now with his little brother, his half brother? I'm so curious because I would walk past her every day, like, with my exoneration papers, and what? Oh, I'm sorry, I made 10 copies for you today. I'm sorry, I plastered them all over your car today. I'm sorry, I brought them up to your job. That package, that's from me. And it has my check. It has my, my release. Like, I want to know, like, do you have any relationship? Has she ever been remorseful? That to me is like, I've Googled 101 times. I'm like, I have to find this lady. Is she around?
That's a great one.
That's a great one. Her? I want to know.
Antron, so Korey, yes, right. I think we can all agree he in our eyes he suffered the most, being that he none of them did anything, but he just was being a good friend. But really, Antron is probably the guy I would love to sit with. Rio, I know we talked about that Oprah Netflix, the additional part. Definitely watch that when you get a chance. Because you feel these gentlemen's pain through the screen. Oh, you said it earlier, Yusef probably seems the most adjusted to everything, but Antron, that I just feel so bad. He just wears the pain. He wears the pain. And I would just love to sit down and have a conversation with him. There's not even one question I would like to ask him. It's just kind of, you know, just to really just have a deep conversation with him.
Yeah.
And
I think his religion too, you know, how, you know, that his Muslim brothers and sisters, brothers, hold him down while he, you know what I mean, in a different way than if he didn't. Like his mom was like, hey, stick with us, you know, and that level of protection, like you have to have a clique in prison, right? So if that level of protection helped him.
Yeah, Muslim Brotherhood. That's a good group to be a part of if that's gonna happen in there. Yeah. And just one last thing, with Antron, the relationship with his mother, obviously, when he came home, and how she said, look, you know, your father made some mistakes. We don't stop loving. And, you know, we're all he had. And just the love and dedication that all these moms had. But, you know, to the man that convinced her son to confess and then leaves her.
Yeah, I just don't love like that, Tom. I don't love like that.
And look,
I love like that. I love you.
I don't know if love like that exists anymore. Let's be clear. I don't know if love like that exists anymore.
I don't know what that situation was. Then I just feel like she was misguided, you know. Yep. And I think that Black women have a way of taking on everything. The world. We have to support our man. We have to support our kids. We have to, you know, you have to work full time. You have to do that. You have to grow. You have to do that. We take on everything, and especially at that point where there was no other outlet but to take it all on. You know, that's what I'm expected to do. I got to carry the weight of the whole community, especially now you're Black. You're locking up all of our Black men. I got to take the weight on. I got to do it. Who else is going to do it? I don't know. It's kind of sad. So, B, who would you want to know more about?
You know, everybody sort of hit the hitters, right? Antron, Korey, Yusef. I'm gonna go with Kevin. You know, Kevin was, I think, the smallest guy going in, and so it'd be interesting. I know when I was growing up, I was a little guy as well, and so it'd be interesting to get his take and how was he, how did he fight for himself? How did he, you know, get by? And Juvie being the little guy. So it'd be interesting to see when you talk, you know, when you watch his interviews, he seems to be, he's kind of right in the middle, right? You have Yusef and you have Raymond who have adjusted and are doing things from a business perspective. You have Korey, you have Antron who you would think suffered the most, and then Kevin is that middle guy, I think, who's right in the middle of the on the line, I guess. And so it'd be interesting to see and talk to him and just ask him how he made it, how he was able to, you know, again, being the smallest guy on the potentially on the block, and how did you get through those tough times?
That's good. He's so his I guess character's a little more quiet than the others, and you don't see his pain as much as the others wear theirs on their sleeves. So I like that. I like that perspective because it just goes to just a life lesson. You know, you should check on everybody in your phone book. You know, everybody should mean something, no matter how strong or what. You always check on everybody. Everybody has a story that's worth learning more about. So there's a richer lesson in where you're coming from.
Yeah, they always say check on your strongest friends, right? So if you're out there, you know, check on your people. You know what I mean? Even the ones you don't hear from, the ones who look like everything is good, everything might not always be good. So check on your strongest friends.
Yeah. Oh, well, fellas, I feel like we touched on a lot. Does anybody have anything that left unsaid? I mean, it's just...
You know, just for those who have not seen When They See Us, go see it. Netflix, you got somebody's account. If it's not your account, borrow a family member's account. Somebody, watch it.
We don't support that. We need Netflix to sponsor the show. Go ahead.
Yeah, we do for sure. And look, when I watched episode or part one, after part one, I went and watched Black Godfather. I needed some positive reinforcement before I watched the rest of that. So, folks, that's another good one. Go check it out. Netflix, we need that check. Cut the check. It's on Netflix, people.
Yeah, that's the Black Godfather is one that's on my list. It's something I want to see as well. But you know, I guess my takeaway is it's a story that we've known. It's a story that's been told to us again in a just a spectacular. This thing should win awards. If not, it's somebody's robbing us. But you know, whatever. I know it wasn't made for that reason. It wasn't made for the awards. It was made to tell these boys' story, which I think was done and mission accomplished. I think that, you know, in another podcast, another episode, we'll talk about the criminal justice system and how it continues to just work the way it's set up to work, which doesn't work out for certain folks, people of color, especially. But there's so much more to unpack as it relates to the criminal justice system. Today is Juneteenth, y'all. We got to celebrate, and we got to keep celebrating us, because I don't think that if we don't do it, who else will? I'm out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys know that the Equal Justice Initiative with Brian Stevenson, that he has an event here in Orlando on Friday. So if we can make it out to that, I think that we should. He just does great work in terms of the criminal justice system and getting people who should never have been made to be guilty out.
And getting them off of death row. Yeah, they're celebrating. They're going to give a historical marker to July Perry. His murder was what kicked off the Korey massacre, which is very close to home, being here in Central Florida. So yeah, if you can get out for that.
Yeah, and it's like the biggest mass murder, whereas, you know, people really look at, you know, Paul's the Vegas incident, a lot of these other incidents, but a Korey massacre is, you know, one of the largest in U.S. history, and people, they forget about that. So we have much work to do, guys.
Man, sorry. I just wanted to say something on the Korey massacre, man. When we talk about the wealth transfer in this country, do some research, y'all, on that Korey massacre and look that up, and the way that the land was taken, and those folks, those Black people in that area never got that land back. So do some research. There's some good stuff to talk about.
All right, everybody. Let me get a head nod if you're out. Let me get a finger up if you have something to say. All right, my guys are nodding.
No, real quick, I just want to say, hey, I always enjoy the conversations we have. I always enjoy the thoughts. Oh, I love when you coined the term thought partners. This is something, obviously this movie was something that moved each of us a very similar way, but each different ways. And like you said, and like they said on the Oprah Netflix special, it is painful, but it is necessary to watch. Do something with your pain after you see this. Take some kind of action. Brian Stevenson, Equal Justice Initiative, donate. Just go out and just research. Like Brian said, there's tons of stories out there. The Korey massacre, that's another one. So just check it out.
All right, y'all.
One more thing. Sorry, it's me.
As
my mother always told me growing up, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. So that's always stuck with me. So that's relevant till this day, and it will be, you know, going forward.
Yeah, we have to be strong enough and a loud enough voice for change to happen. So that's the whole reason that we're here. And we'll continue to bring not just the conversations, but the things that we're doing behind the scenes to create more conversations and a ripple of change. So we appreciate everybody checking in with us tonight. We're going to come back again with something else bigger, greater every time. So hit us up on Instagram and Facebook, Many Hands Podcast, and the website, manyhandspodcast.com, and see everything that we're doing. You can listen to the show on a lot of mediums, and we're going to be back with you soon. Grand opening.
Grand
Grand
close.
closing.